This episode of Recording Studio Rockstars is brought to you by OWC, Isotope, Atom Audio, JZ Microphones, and Spectra 1964. You're hearing my voice right now on the JZ V12 microphone through the Spectra 1964 STX100D mic pre and C610 complementer with Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron all recorded safely onto an OWC SSD and mixed on Atom Audio monitors. Please remember to check out our awesome sponsors using the link in the show notes. It's a great way to help support this show. Now get ready to rock.
Printing them into the session, committing to them so that you can't go back and keep tweaking them. That's something I've found that has been working for me. I mean, you can still go tweak them, you can still go EQ them or whatever, but having them printed as an audio track somehow frees up my brain. Once something's printed, I see it as more of it, that's staying. And if I want to change it, I edit it as audio as opposed to continuing to mess with the parameters in a plugin.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. Atom Audio can provide all your monitor needs, whether you are setting up a first-time home studio for recording music or podcasts, or a world-class full-size studio for professional mixing and mastering in stereo or immersive sound. Featuring the XART tweeter and custom DSP onboard processing, the new A-series monitors will perfectly adapt to your studio. Get the Atom Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for you with an extended 5-year warranty at atomaudio.com. The JZ Microphone Vintage Series are built by hand in Latvia, featuring the patented Golden Drop capsule design for enhanced clarity that will give your recordings the classic vintage tone. Our friends at JZ Microphones have also come up with a special offer only available to Recording Studio Rockstars listeners. Use the limited time coupon ROCKSTAR to get 40% off the V67, V47, or V12 microphones. And to make this deal even better, they'll throw in a free shock mount worth $120 for a limited time at jzmic.com. Howdy, rock stars. It's your host, Lid Shaw, and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Stephen Shirk, an engineer, co-producer, and musician. Stephen has been a guest on the podcast back on episode RSR402 when he talked about his background and starting Shirk Studios in Chicago, restoring a beautiful Sphere console and building a dedicated space for recording full bands to analog tape and Pro Tools. I'm going to quote from his website here, describing the console. It's a 1976 Sphere Eclipse A Discrete Inline Console, 32 channels, 24 mic pre's, 16 times 8 buses, 24 outputs during recording, with 8 920 EQs and 24 910 EQs. Reichenbach input and Jensen output transformers give the console a punchy tone that defines the pinnacle of the 70s American console design. Balanced line input mod features Cinemag transformers and discrete GAR 6220 op amps, SPA62, close quotes. We get to say really geeky things like that in this podcast because we love this stuff. In 2019, Stephen opened up the studio to Recording Studio Rockstars for an amazing weekend mixing clinic with OWC, and Anthony Gravino was teaching, which was a blast. We had Rockstars traveling overnight on the bus from Canada all the way down to Chicago, flying in from New York State just to be there. And we were able to listen to everybody's music and offer feedback. It was just a really, really great time. Today, we will catch up and see what's new over at Shirk Studios and learn more about how Stephen is recording and mixing such great sounding records. Thanks again to Anthony Gravino for making our introduction and for being on the podcast multiple times like Stephen. Please welcome Stephen Shirk back to Recording Studio Rockstars. Stephen, are you ready to rock yet again, dude?
Yes, I am, Lidge. Good to be here.
Glad to have you here, man. Your voice sounds cool, man. What are you? What mic are you talking to us on?
I'm using the RCA44BX. I did a full RCA chain today to see how it sounded. It's probably got
you and Frank Sinatra.
Yeah. But I recently rebuilt a RCA preamp, and so I wanted to see how it sounded.
Really? So this is the RCA44 is that big ribbon, that huge one that hangs upside down in front of you?
Yeah, the big, I don't know, Bing Crosby mic. Is that what you call it?
Right.
But it's, everybody used it around the world for radio broadcast and that sort of thing.
And then what's the RCA mic pre?
It's a tube preamp. It's the RCA BA21A. And it's kind of the last.
You built one?
Well, I found a module that was used and, kind of refurbished it and then racked it up, added phantom power and some impedance changing.
Phantom power for the 44.
Yeah, well,
for the ribbon.
It's always sucks when you got a preamp you like, and someone's like, hey, could I use this mic on it? And you're like, well, sorry, I don't have phantom power,
Right.
So just did some stuff to get it clean and sounding great, and thought I'd give it a try. So we're going to 44 into the 21A into a RCA BA6A limiter. That's not really limiting anything. And I just wanted to see how it sounded.
It sounds great.
Chocolatey flavor today.
Legit.
It's working. Hasn't cut out yet, has it?
No, it's funny. I have an Ampex, what is it? The MX something. I forget what the model is, but it's the 4-channel.
Oh, the
Ampex mic pre's with 2 outs. I think it used to accompany a tape machine or something.
Oh, okay.
Like that.
Cool. Sound great.
And it's a tube mic pre, and I did the fancy mods on it at one point where we put phantom power on it and phase flips, and I thought I was going to blend guitar mics and all this fanciness. And one of the funny things I discovered about doing that is sometimes with the older mic pre's, the level that it's designed for on a dynamic mic is quite different from a condenser, and sometimes the condensers it works and it can sound great, but the condensers can also come out really hot on the mic pre.
Blow up the input a little too much.
Yeah, have you tried a condenser on that one yet?
Yeah, like with the hotter mics, like hot output tube mics, especially like a 67 or 47 or something like that. It's I had to put a pad on the input so that it could accommodate, because they were just designed, these older tube preamps were designed for older, lower output mics. And the input impedance is much different too. I think the old RCA is like a 150 ohm input stock, where most modern preamps are like 1200 and up or something like that. So just the way they talk to each other is different.
Now, how much electronics do you know? Do you feel like you really understand all this stuff, or
I'm learning?
Are you enough
learning.
To be dangerous kind of thing?
Enough to be dangerous, but I'm totally learning. Buying the Sphere console, I don't know, 7 years ago or whatever it was, kind of forced my hand on learning more electronics and getting the confidence to tech my own stuff. And so I ask a lot of questions from the techs that I've hired in the past, and it's I don't know, it's kind of my second passion after engineering and audio work. I spend time at home at night after the kids are in bed, nerding out in my shop, doing various projects, rebuilding mics or preamps like this or tape machine stuff, whatever I can. It just is kind of a good for my brain kind of hobby thing,
Yeah, I always loved soldering and building things. It feels very meditative,
in
kind of a nice way.
It reminds me of my youth.
Unfortunately, as I got older, I started to realize that it's hard for me to see what the little soldering stuff. I got to have some.
You got to get one of those big magnifying glass lights.
Yeah, I want one. Then I'll paint little toy soldiers like an evil overlord or something.
There you go. Nice.
So that's cool. So, and then that's smart that you kind of set up, you got the studio, but you also set up a shop at home so that you can sort of separate those tasks and still do it
I used to keep the shop at the studio. I keep a toolbox here for emergency situations, but most often I'll take everything home if I can.
Yeah.
And that kind of evolved through the course of the pandemic, where I just wasn't coming to the studio that much, and took it upon myself to, use that time to clean modules in the console and put in new switches. Old consoles just need new switches. It's just how it goes.
Yeah.
And so there was a period of time where I was just taking 8 modules at a time home and spending the night doing exciting stuff like that. But the shop at home it's pretty basic basement shop. But I have a scope and a laptop down there and the soldering iron, obviously. Plenty of solder fumes to keep me buzzed. So
nice.
Everything's
nice.
Yeah.
Well, let's see here. So you've got the RCA 44 mic set up, and then I think you did something kind of clever to even get it to talk to Zoom. So we can geek out a little bit on that because, like I always like to say, this is the one show where we get to just talk about like the mic we're using to talk about the mic we're using.
Got it.
So you used a new feature, right, in Pro Tools?
Yeah, I just upgraded the Pro Tools system here last week. I've done a few sessions with it. It's been rock solid. So I'd moved to 2022.9.
And just to clarify, you're on HDX, right?
HDX card, yeah. So I got
which
one of those.
Is what I have too.
Yeah, they're great. I mean, I've had it for a long time. It's kind of old technology, but it's pretty solid.
But it's we should preface it by saying if we were joking, it's a bit of a walled garden where like you can't get in and out of it. Pro Tools takes over and it won't talk to the computer very easily.
Right. Well, it seems they just let the gate down. And this new version of Pro Tools has this thing called Pro Tools Audio Bridge, where you can set up aux IO tracks in Pro Tools in your IO settings and route audio in and out of Pro Tools from other applications in your OS. So I've got the Zoom app going in the background, and I found a tutorial last night on how to set this up. It took about 3 minutes, and it worked right out of the gate, following their directions. And so I've got a bus out from my audio track in Pro Tools that's got my voice on it, and that's sending it to Zoom. And I've got a audio track coming in that's recording your voice. And both it's a two-way bridge, 2 separate bridges. Bring the audio back and forth to Pro Tools. So it works so far. If it drops out here, we'll let you know.
So you got your mic going straight into Pro Tools, but then using the aux thing, you can sort of send something out of Pro Tools to another app.
Yeah.
And then you sent my voice from
your voice
Zoom
is coming
app
from Zoom
Pro
back
Tools.
into an audio track.
Clever.
So it's kind of just like
hold up, just 60 minutes. Watch this. Hello, Pro Tools. Did it like that?
It totally liked it.
All right, sorry, I'm being really silly.
It's all good.
Just because I just woke up before the interview. Okay, cool. So, well, that's awesome because that's been a huge headache for ages for doing sessions where you want to interact with other apps, for example, or coming and going from other, for simple things like doing a Pro Tools, recording in Pro Tools and doing an interview on Zoom. It'll also be really, really handy for any of us who are trying to create a video and you want to be able to talk on a mic and have that recorded, but also get the Pro Tools session to show up in the recording. In fact, I'm actually rolling another quick, easy workaround for recording high-res audio at the same time. Or relatively high-res audio at the same time as something like a Zoom call, is to just open the QuickTime app and make an audio recording with the same input. And I guess you could do a QuickTime video capture of your Pro Tools session that way.
Yeah. It's pretty cool what they're doing.
Yeah. All right. Well, that might be geeky enough on that.
No, it's all good. I think it's an evolution that came probably from the pandemic with everybody on Zoom chats and things like that. And what's that plugin, Audio Movers, listen to? Everybody was using that, and I'm sure Avid was like, wait a second, we're making it hard. We need to open this door.
Yeah, and I guess the Audio Movers might have allowed the audio to go out of Pro Tools and then into another app. I never tried it like that. I always tried it only over the internet.
Right.
But cool stuff. I don't know. It is fun to geek out on all those, the routing stuff inside the computer. And of course, you and I grew up on routing as a physical thing in the studio. I mean, it still is for you. I mean, it still is for all of us. But, I think early on, when you had to connect everything to everything else, you really understand how signal flow works. And in the computer, it becomes this, magical fairy dust and clouds or something.
Yeah, I watched one more tutorial last night that talked about how you could get Pro Tools and Logic to talk together.
Using that same audio bridge.
Yeah, using, I think it's called an IAC thing where you can send MIDI back and forth. Like if you wanted to use a virtual instrument in Logic, which Logic has tons of those and they're great, apparently. I don't have it, but you could write your MIDI over here in Pro Tools, but it's sending that out over to Logic and the audio is coming back on this bridge back into Pro Tools. And so it just basically is giving you all these other, software plugin or software instruments and stuff in the background.
Yeah.
To use in Pro Tools,
I think IAC was the inter-application connect something
like that.
But I think that sends MIDI from one app to another.
Right.
And it'll send things like MIDI clock. So if you press start in Pro Tools, it'll send a start message over to Logic to start as well.
Right. Kind of and I think there's a whole bunch of Dolby Atmos kind of routing options too, because I think you can have a standalone renderer working in the background. Yeah. So you don't have to change your engine in Pro Tools. I don't know. I don't do Atmos, but it's cool that they're giving people that option.
Are you a guy who works on cars too? Is changing an engine something you're used to?
Absolutely not.
All right. Well, so tell us a little bit more about the Sphere, because that's cool. I know we've talked about it before, but it's just such a beautiful console that you got there. In my description of it, you mentioned it being a pinnacle of 1970s American console design. So maybe give us just a recap on what that is. The history as you want to, or what that console means to you.
Gotcha. Well, Sphere was an evolution that came from the original Quad 8, not Quad 8, Electrodyne. Quad 8 kind of split off from Electrodyne, and then another branch was Sphere, and Sphere was more of a custom design. They kind of took everything that they loved about Quad 8 and Electrodyne and kind of cleaned it up, gave it more headroom. But kept what they loved about it. And I don't know. You mentioned in the introduction the Reichenbach transformers and the Jensen output transformers. Like that's, I think, pretty similar to what was going on in the API consoles at the time, and like all the bigger American consoles were using those transformers and just the topology with the op amps and things like that. So it's all discrete, and my console is pretty basic. There's an A and a B and a C. I've got an A. However, I've been told maybe it's a B. I don't know. There's because they were custom consoles, no two of them are really alike. And there were only about 60 or 70 ever made. And so it gets a little confusing on exactly what you have, but it's very obvious what the C's are because they have a lot more routing options. And there's a lot more stuff in the path too. A lot less discrete op amps and things like that. So, there's a lot more ICs and things like that in the Sphere, in the Eclipse C. So the A is a very simple path, very clean path. Lots of headroom, but a lot of punch too. It's not sterile. It's juicy when you hit it hard. But if you want to be conservative, you can keep things very clean and in hi-fi. So I've had the console since 2014, and it's been a huge learning curve in terms of electronics and taking care of it and learning how consoles work and how they get repaired. But it's been a really great thing to have at the studio. It's a different price point than a Neve or an API, but it delivers a great sound that I think is
meaning it's not quite as expensive.
Those brands have really ramped up. Just I don't know why, but they are super expensive, and the Sphere is not in the same price category. Thank God. And that's
I've used a Sphere a few times. So I had a session in a writing studio in Berry Hill the first time I used one, and then I used it again, and I immediately was like, wow, this thing sounds like there's this clarity to everything we were doing.
Was that the Creative Workshop?
Maybe it was Berry Hill, and it was a songwriting publishing.
Like a
studio.
gold? Was it gold?
No, it was white. It
okay.
was white. And it It had the lever EQs, the graphic
Yeah,
style.
yeah. Those are very unique to the. Well, there's a few that have the Aegis, I believe, is similar, and the everybody knows the API 560.
Yeah.
It's very similar.
Yeah.
The Sphere EQ is a 9-band.
But the Sphere EQ, they're detented.
Which is great.
Right? Whereas the 560, they're like
continuous. The 5.6 is continuous. You're right. The detents are great because you can recall it so easily. I keep notes, kind of old school. I have like recall sheets, and after every mix, I write down all the settings I can. And with the detented DQs, it's very easy to get back to that. So
you had a note that said, "Do interview again with Lidge on Recording Studio Rockstars." My recording studio is proudly powered by OWC, and I love how it's improved and sped up my workflow. OWC can connect all your audio work drives, trackballs, mix controllers, MIDI keyboards, audio interfaces, displays, or cameras so that you can work fast and focus on making your best record ever. Go check out the Mini Stack STX, Thunderbay 4, or Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at macsales.com/rockstars to find the perfect solution for your studio from OWC. Hey Rockstars, over here. I've got a secret to tell you about how I get a consistent sound mixing over 1,000 hours of Recording Studio Rockstars. My secret is using Isotope, RX, Ozone, and Neutron on every single episode. Right now, you're hearing RX breath control, D-click, D-clip, DS, D-plosive, voice denoise, Ozone multiband compression, Neutron EQ, and limiting, all from Isotope. Go to isotope.com/rockstars and use the secret code ROCK10 and get 10% off any plugin purchase from Isotope. You can tell your friends, but, be cool about it. So then we did a transfer at Quad Studios once, going like the craziest setup. But we went ADATs through this wacky digital converter thing to Mitsubishi 32 track, and then took that to Arden Studios to mix.
Wow.
Yeah, but times used to be much more complicated back then, Rockstars. And that was, we had a Sphere to listen to all the tracks on, and I was like, "Ooh, this sounds really good." And then, of course, we did the mix clinic at Shirk Studios with Anthony Gravino back in 2019, and that was when we got to hear it again. And I'm just so struck by the sound quality of everything you guys are doing there. And Rockstars, we have a playlist of Stephen's records in the show notes. So just scroll down, click on that, and go listen to it. And you'll really hear there's a quality to all these records that you've shared. And I don't know if every single one was, on the console or not, but, there's just a great, great, great sound going on. So
thank you.
That's cool, man. When you think of going through all the efforts to have a console like that, and, maybe occasionally you just plug a mic straight into a built-in mic pre on a Pro Tools interface or something like that, and you hear what that sounds like, which would be a reflection of the common home studio starting environment or whatever. What are thoughts that come into your head about like, oh, this, when I do it through the console, I get this kind of sound. When I just plug a mic straight into an interface and turn up the mic pre, I get this kind of sound. Is that a fair question to ask?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, those standalone mic pre's, most of them, or at least the design of them, came from a console. So it's the preamp itself is pretty similar. What I think is different is all the routing options you get with a console. And that sounds like, well, duh, you've got all this stuff, but it's opens up your creativity so much, I think, during a tracking session. Your ability to molt things, to combine two tracks into one in the recorder, which isn't such a big deal in Pro Tools, but it sure is in terms of managing your mental real estate, not having to look at 3 mics that you may have put on a guitar amp. You can sum those all to one, and just move forward with that decision, or the kick drum, the in and the out, that kind of stuff, combining them, summing them to one. You can do that so easily on a console. Check the phase real quick, easy. You don't have to patch anything. You just press a bus button.
Yeah, plus the faders, just having a few mics going on something and just adjusting the faders a little bit and changing the balance of things really changes sound. Especially if you did, like I used to do multiple mics on a guitar amp, and then you'd move some of the faders around. It really changes the tone of that guitar sound.
Yeah, rather than grabbing the EQ, you can blend that, let's say 57 against the darker ribbon mic, and really play with the frequency response that you're getting in the end.
One-handed while you're holding the guitar too.
Absolutely. And just the ability to keep things hard patched on the returns on the console. You can real quick just add a bunch of reverb to your voice, or you can do all kinds of stuff. It's during tracking sessions I try to keep a delay coming back to the console, even though we're not necessarily needing it. I like to get creative once in a while when the session allows. Like with the Lexicon Primetime, I love playing with that thing and printing some effects in real time. Not the whole session, but when it feels like, oh, this would be cool. And kind of it's got that freeze button on there. You sample something to hold it and drop the pitch and just create a drone that sits in the back, and the artist never hears it until they come to the control room. And if I'm into it, or if I'm excited by it, I'll share it. And if I'm like, it was kind of a waste of time, I won't. But it's just cool to be able to make things happen quickly, as opposed to, while you're tracking, you can't really open a plugin and print what you just did.
That's so true. That's a great reminder. I always like thinking about those differences. And that is one of those, like, you can't, while something's recording, think, oh, let me add this plugin. If you didn't think to add it in the first place. Whereas you can, with a console, you can literally plug it in, mute a channel, pull that fader up, and now it's included all of a sudden.
Right. You can either commit it and bust it in with, whatever you're recording, or if you're planning ahead, just keep a couple of tracks open, recording nothing until you're ready to print to them, which is what you kind of have to do, because you can't instantiate a new track and record enable it while you're recording something else.
Come on, Pro Tools. That's next.
One day maybe that'll happen. But
something tells me Reaper you can do that.
I'm sure, because it's only 5 megabytes in file size.
That's like it's almost like a running joke. I don't know if it's really true, but I feel like in conversations there's always somebody like, well, Reaper can do it.
Totally.
Well, very cool. Yeah, that's hip. So always having a couple of tracks ready, and then you can just sort of route things to them. Last minute.
Absolutely.
And it'll be.
And sometimes it's a total waste, but sometimes you capture magic, and you're like, nothing sucks more than when you show something to a client and they're like, that is so cool. What did you do? And I'm like, oh, well, let me try it again. I didn't print that one, and then you have to recreate it, and it's not the same.
Yeah.
If you're always printing,
that's a reminder too. I was thinking about how I want to have more pedals and stuff, more outboard gear ready to use for effects, because of what you just said, which is that we've grown accustomed to this idea of using plugins for things, which can do wonderful things, but it's like nothing's ever really captured.
Yeah, absolutely. It can always be tweaked.
Yeah, it can always be tweaked. It can always play back a little different next time, possibly. Stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, so what else is new over at Shirk, at your studio? I mean, you've probably been, as you said, maybe what's new is just having enough opportunity to catch up with all the cleaning and maintenance and fixing things, which comes with.
There was plenty of time for that.
Analog studios.
There was plenty of time for that. But I don't know. I've added a few pieces around here. I picked up a 1/4-inch ATR 102 last summer, which was super fun. I'd never had a good, 2-track recorder. And now I just print through that all that when I'm mixing. I'm always printing to that, or I guess they call it layback, where you're kind of printing to it, but capturing that back into Pro Tools in real time, so that you're not, you are burning tape, because tape doesn't last forever, but I can reuse tape. Nothing's living on tape. It's not going to a mastering house on tape. Unless of course the client wants me to do that, but they're never.
Have you found sort of a measurement, like a benchmark for when is enough time that tape has been used? It's
usually, it's hard to put a time limit on it, because sometimes it spins more in a day than it does, the next day. But it's pretty easy to tell when you align the machine, which is something, if you're going to print your 2-mix 2, you have to align the machine. You can't just assume that it's going to always be good, because the high frequency is going to probably drift a little bit. And if it's not,
and so when you're aligning, if it's
it just gets more difficult to get that. Yeah, it gets more difficult to get a steady 10K on the record side.
Yeah,
and so I'm pretty good about aligning the machine, and I can do it pretty quickly and just make it kind of a ritual for mix days. And it's also a way to really custom tailor the machine. For the longest time with tape machines, I was, I would just kind of follow the book and align it like, here's flat. This is what it's supposed to be. And I would never get very creative with it. Mostly because I was working on a multi-track machine, which is kind of like, it just gets cumbersome, like having that many channels that are tweaked differently. But on a 2-track machine, we're just dealing with the left and right. It's being able to kind of fine-tune the bias and fine-tune the frequency response based on what you want to get out of the tape print. How hard you're going to hit it. If you over-bias, like the Ampex manual says, I don't know, over-bias by 2.5 or 2 3/4 dB. And the guy who teched my machine, Soren Wittrup, before I started using it steadily, he was like, no, man, I mean, sure, follow the rules, but try pushing it. Take it to 5 over. See how you like that. Go less. And
yeah, it's funny to think about stuff like that. It's, you think about like the guidelines for setting up and aligning the machine, and you're right. We would look at that and go like, oh, well, this is how you're supposed to do it. This
right.
Is just,
I want the best.
It's just science. They scienced the shit out of this. but then you think about it like, what if somebody came along and said that for EQ? You'd be like, yeah, but I mean, EQ, it's just a guideline. It's just like a starting place.
Exactly.
And to think about the tape machines where it's like, okay, whose ears do I want to, whose ears am I listening to right here? My ears and what I think sounds cool, or some dude who was back in the tech shop somewhere, decades ago, who just wrote down the bias number in a manual because they were looking at a measurement device. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So that's been a whole new can of worms for me, learning how to get out of the tape machine what I want. It's with regards to low frequency response or the high frequency response, or how much compression you're getting, or how much crunch you're getting, all that stuff. It can have a pretty dramatic effect. I mean, it doesn't make a shitty song sound great, but a good mix,
but it can make a great song sound shitty.
That's super easy to do. Just don't align the machine. But
that's cool. So you can adjust the bias settings and get slightly different sound. You can change your high frequency record EQ,
all that stuff.
And then your playback lows and highs as well, right?
Yeah. And the way that it kind of squeezes the low end is really what's special. I think about that machine. And the mod that Soren did keeps it flat all the way down, even below the head bump. And so it's just got great low end. And it's been a fun addition to the studio.
And what tape speed
I'm going 15 most of the time.
And have you explored 15 with Dolby or anything like that?
I don't have a Dolby system, but the noise is so it's not an issue. It's that's one of the better things I think about the ATR, is that it just is a very quiet machine.
Yeah.
As long as your heads are good and your tape is good, you're in pretty good place.
I just had did an interview with well, I'm going to keep saying this, and hopefully the interview comes out, because if it doesn't, I'm going to sound really stupid. But I did an interview with Bill Simzik, and we were talking about records that he had done, Hotel California and Joe Walsh, and all these great records. And we were talking about tape speeds, and he said 15 IPS with Dolby, which was cool to hear. I think you got to get a Dolby just because it sounds like a lot of fun.
Totally.
But I think there's a sound to it too. I think it's like, it's a kind of a processed thing that can sound really cool too. So yeah, all that stuff is so much fun. I hate to say it. I finally accepted, I embraced the digital age, and I've moved my console out of my tape machines because I just hadn't used them in a while. And also because I was like, I realized that with some of these things, it's like we're just, we have our time on this planet as a human being. And with some of this great vintage gear, we have our time with it too,
Right.
And so I felt that helped me feel very good about like
You had your experiences together.
Go to a new home. Like the guy who's got my old multi-track tape machine. I know he's using the shit out of it, and he's probably having a blast making records. So that's really cool.
Send it to a place where it's going to get used.
Yeah. That's cool that you got the 102 in there. That is the same tape machine that Universal Audio has.
Exactly.
Plugin, isn't it?
Exactly. And I've heard that plugin's really good. I just don't have any UA stuff. The digital stuff. And
you can have UA, you can have a UA version, or you can have an OG.
Yeah, that's what I don't need that option. It's I enjoy having the real thing and printing to it and committing to it. And it just
have you tried do you set it up for a slap?
I don't use it for slap that much. I have another tape machine that was it was my dad's. It's like a TAC 4010 from I guess probably the 70s. Just like a consumer grade. I think they call it quarter track. It's 1/4-inch half track. Where it's 2 tracks going each direction.
Now I guess the key to doing any kind of a delay option Rockstars is you have to have a 3-head machine. In other words, you've got a head that will record the audio on, but you have to have a dedicated play head that will play it back a moment later.
Right. And it's different on every machine, the space between the record and the playback head.
And if you can have vary speed on the machine, that's really key because then you can adjust the delay speed.
This one does not have a vary speed, but I use it all. It's been one of my most fun additions to the studio. I've had it sitting around the studio forever, and it's never been serviced other than a new rubber belt put in there. It's never been recapped. The motors are kind of wonky, and I get wobble and all kinds of goofiness out of it. But it's just like an effect machine, and I print slap to it, or I use it for slap occasionally. I print lots of tracks to it just to have this saturated track to blend in with the original. I nudge it back in time and play with that sometimes to create a chorus, sometimes
that's cool.
Lock them in super tight, but the motor variation and inaccuracy creates a wobble that is sometimes really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, sometimes tap the reels and stuff and change the speed of the tape, and kind of like flanging, but not quite as cool sounding. But
right, because you're affecting it on the tape, but then you're bringing it back in and lining it up closely to the original, so that you have these two, one of which is original and one is sort of moving around a little bit and with this weird sound.
Totally.
And that's a great reminder for doing that with any kind of gear we can think about. There was I was just at AES not long ago, and Chad Blake was up on stage, and I got to ask him a question for a cool effect, something cool he had tried recently. And he finally thought of something, which was taking a vocal, playing it out of the speaker, and then he took his Neumann binaural Dunkoff head, a great name for a mic.
Totally.
And then like going up with that stereo mic around the speaker and moving it about, and then blending that back in, and you get all this kind of like, confusing stereo imagery and stuff for the sound. So that stuff's fun.
It's kind of like somebody taking a video with their iPhone or whatever around the studio, and you hear all the phasing as they move from the speakers and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Have you tried taking an iPhone recording and blending that back in on a session?
One time we did, like, for the end of a song, there was a vocal. And so I had the artist sing into the mic, a good, whatever, condenser mic. And then he had an iPhone, I had an iPhone, and we put them out in the room. One of them, like, inside of a bucket or something to get some goofy resonance, and another one, like, I forget which, maybe just on the table. But taking those, and he was shouting and moving around and stuff. And we would take all three of them and blend them together to get something. And it, it wasn't like, oh my God, this is amazing, but it was different. And that's what we needed, was something different.
Yeah. Hey, Rockstars, are you recording your own music or other people's music in your studio, but you're having trouble getting your mixes to sound great? Do they sound kind of weak or distant or lack punch or clarity? Well, I've got a gift to help you take your mixes from sounding like basement demos to sounding a lot closer to professional mixes. And it's my free introductory course called Mix Master Bundle. This course shows you how to get pro sound with your mixes from your home studio using free plugins and Pro Tools. And the best part is that these fundamental mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you're in Logic, Cubase, PreSonus, Studio One, Reaper, or whatever you're using. If you're ready to make your best record ever, then go to mixmasterbundle.com and get started now for free. And you can find the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. All right, here's an idea that's popping into my head. It's idea day. You just take, if you got a few extra people, you have somebody out singing on a mic, but then you have those people in that room with iPhones and they're just moving close to the singer and then back away from the singer. And they're sort of panned out front and center and left, right.
That'd be cool.
And then blend all those back
in stereo.
Be incredible.
Yeah. It'd be like,
I feel like last time we were on this, we talked about that trick where you send the sound from one Jambox to another and then record it back again and back again and back again until the original sound disappears and all you've got is the
white noise,
weird, freaky stuff from the room, the switchy weirdness.
Yeah.
There's so many cool things to do like that you don't need a single plugin for.
Yeah. Well, that's what having stuff that maybe doesn't even work right, but just having it around the studio is so fun. And it adds so much to the experience. I mean, when clients come to the studio, yes, they want to get a great record, but they're also, they want an experience that they can't get in their bedroom or their basement or whatever. Yeah. And having stuff like that, I think, is really cool. And it's the stuff they walk away remembering. A bunch of people standing around a computer looking at somebody tweak a plugin. Nobody remembers that, but
well, they might remember that sucked.
Yeah, right. But it's like a day at the office. But when you've got some goofy stuff and it gets a cool take and some big smiles, I don't know. I think that's what people come for. Part of it, at least.
Are there some other fun, weird things like that you can remember? I mean, if you can't remember right this sec, bring it up
I've got some things. I've got my old GE boombox that I got in like the 4th grade. It was my first stereo. I saw it in the K's merchandise catalog.
Back when you were cool.
Yeah, I was way cooler then. But it was like I wanted that for Christmas, and I asked for it forever. And finally, I was gifted that for Christmas, and had a little cassette deck, and it also had phono inputs on the back. I didn't have a turntable, but it had phono inputs. And fast forward, 20 years, and I had it at the studio just for, I don't know, because I didn't want to throw it away. And we were looking for reasons or looking for a way to get a really messed up guitar sound. And so we found enough adapters to plug a guitar into the phono input on this boombox. And it's a complete mismatch of level and impedance and all that stuff. It's totally wrong. And most of the time it was like an AM radio tuner, is depending on what direction you were facing with the guitar. But if you get in the right spot and you play hard enough, you could just hear all the transistors in there just fits out, just kind of blow up and fall apart. And half the time your note would go away and half the time would come back. And that was one of those things where you're like, wow, I'm glad I have that around. It's it's cool. Not what it was intended for at all.
I have what is the brand name? It's a mono tube reel-to-reel tape machine that I bought.
Nice.
You wouldn't find it for $18 now, but at the time I found it in a pawn shop around town for that. And it's actually great to record some stuff on the tape and play it back. But what's also great is you can just plug, you put it in record ready, and it has a built-in speaker on it, and you can plug a guitar into that, and it doubles as a guitar amp.
Nice.
Guitar amp with a great sound. And we ended up using that on a Will Kimbrough record many years ago.
Very cool.
But just, it's fun to discover all those different kind of things. And just like all the old jam boxes and stuff like that, remembering Rockstars, that if you can figure out how to get a guitar into it, that might be a killer little guitar sound. You put a mic in front of that and all of a sudden you get this great, unique, small guitar tone.
Yeah. It's fun. It's like the little Smokey Joe amps. You ever use one of those things?
Yeah, I've got one. I've got
an old Camel Light one.
But let's be honest though. How often did I use it? I've mostly used it to just show that I had a Smokey Joe amp. So those were cigarette packs, Rockstars, that with a 9-volt in it and a guitar amp and a speaker put into the side of the cigarette pack, and a speaker jack out so that you could plug into it, and the speaker jack could go into a full 410 or 412 cabinet, a Marshall cabinet, and it would power it.
Yeah. Or you can just put it in line into your amp, like any old amp, a combo.
Oh, for
you know,
a distortion
so
box?
so it's essentially like just a fuzz pedal at that point. And that's honestly how it gets used. When it gets used, that's usually how it ends up getting used. It's like a cheap sounding distortion.
Okay,
but
great.
Micing up that little, whatever it is, 4-inch plastic speaker, that can have some sound or some vibe, you know. It can fit in the mix. Doesn't need up much real
Do you play
estate.
guitar as well yourself?
Yeah, that was like my start, really. I grew up singing choir and playing guitar.
Yeah, are you still playing a bunch on things? And do you have some thoughts about your favorite ways to play and get sounds you like and stuff?
Well, I play on some tracks for people, but I don't do that as frequently as I'd hire somebody to do that. I've kind of figured out, here's what I'm good at. And so
what are you good at?
So not playing guitar on people's records. No, I can here and there. And I've been playing most of my life. And I have good sensibilities about the guitar. I just don't have the chops that I had, 15, 20 years ago. But
well, I guess what I'm getting at too is like when you do play, I'm sure you're very attentive to what is a cool sound versus what isn't. Mm-hmm. And have you found some ways that you feel like this is how I would do it if I was trying to get a cool sound?
I think most recently, the things that I've been getting excited about while we're recording guitars is making sure we have room mics. Number one, getting the whatever close mics you have, not having them right on the grill, but maybe like a foot off, just to get a little bit of air and not so much proximity effect and woof.
Yeah.
So
even a 57,
and because if I'm pulling it that far off the amp, I'm probably giving it a ribbon mic right next to it and using, like we were talking about before, blending those two mics to one track, but finding an equalization balance between those two that fits what we need. Because at the end of the day, you don't always need that big, massive low end in a guitar.
Right.
It's just going to step all over the bass and get muddy, it just gets in the way. So, so that is my starting point, close mics, and then making sure we have a room mic and make that part of the sound, or maybe print it on a separate track. So if you're not sure, you want to commit it, but it's been the thing that my clients have responded to, where they're like, oh, it gives it so much more depth. You can make it sit back in the mix so much easier. You don't have to add reverb. It can still feel dry, but you hear a sense of space. And I think that's something that I think I can offer here at my studio that you can't do it as easily at home. I mean, some places you can, but some neighbors don't let you do that.
Right, because you got to turn the amps up.
Yeah, or kids or parent or family. So anyways, it's for getting guitar sounds, that's something I've really enjoyed. I find that I don't have to do much compression with guitar amps. They're kind of, especially if it's a distorted guitar, because it's naturally compressed with the tubes. Unless the playing is just all over the place. I usually am not compressing guitars.
Now, are you finding a clever way to position that mic, or is it a guessing game and you move things around?
Well, like I said, about a foot out front, and then I usually take the 57 a little off to the side towards the cone, where the dust cap meets the cone, that kind of thing. And then I put the ribbon maybe a little more in the center because it can take a little more of that really bright, harsh stuff that comes right out of the middle of the cone. Yeah. I feel like it's just more forgiving, unless that's what you want. So maybe put the 57 there and you'll have a little more zing. But maybe, I don't know, sometimes for me, that's too much.
Yeah, it's definitely brighter near the center of the cone. I have been recording myself a little more, so I've been trying to, come up with ways to do that. And one of the ways I've been using is came from Jamie Tate on the podcast, where he said, just unplug the guitar so you hear the hiss out of the guitar amp.
Oh.
And then just like move your head around until your ear, with one ear, until your ear says, oh, I kind of like the tone of that. And then just, put your hand and your thumb up and then to mark that spot, and then put the 57 there. And I've been doing that. And I find that that's a pretty quick way to stick a mic on the guitar amp and then go, dial that in. I'm not always convinced that, I don't necessarily know if like some other spot might have been a little bit better or not, but
that's a pretty cool
I
approach,
wonder
though.
if that would work for the foot off the amp too. I'm sure it would, why not,
Well, what I found with the foot off the amp, or even further, if you're using 57, you get too far off and it starts to get pretty small. But
right.
if you move around, I mean, you can't do this long because your ears will get burned out. But if you have whoever,
up the guitar.
you have whoever play, and you walk around the room, and everybody says this, but if you remember to actually do it, you'll find the spot. Like, listen for where the low end takes off and where it doesn't. And if you especially if you just maybe one ear towards the amp and kind of sidestep away from the amp and wait for that low end to kind of come into focus, or where it's the biggest, or whatever you're going for. But actually listening that way, you'll find the spot, and then stick the mic there, and try it. And like I said, we've been told this 1,000 times, and it's hard to get yourself to go out and do it once in a while.
Well, I think combination. I mean, one of the nice things about your studio is you've got a pretty big room. You've got a little bit of movability in the space.
Right.
In tighter studios, sometimes it's like, oh, this is where I can put the mic because I don't know where
I got to close the door.
The mic.
Yeah.
But like maybe thinking about maybe Rockstars, we think about miking it up normal even, and then also going, you know what, I'm always going to have this mic with plenty of slack on the cable where I could easily just move it around. Maybe it's even maybe it's even a straight stand. So it's like, you don't even need a big footprint.
Right.
Just some quick, like, place the mic there. And then the other thing is, I'm with you on, we have a limited window that we can go put our ears in loud stuff and not kind of, not kind of use up what energy we had for listening energy.
Yeah.
You go back,
you'll get fatigued real fast.
Yeah. Your ears are wasted, and now you can't really make a good call on it after that.
Right.
But I mean, I haven't tried this, but, why not try that same trick with, the ear gun muffs, or even an earplug sometime. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
I might find that it still works pretty good because you'll feel the low end for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Have you ever tried one of those robot things? I saw something on Instagram about one last night. And I've always been curious, but I'm
waiting for the full-size robot that will also bring me a drink.
Right. I don't think I could bring myself to set one up on a session. Just
the robot things, to me, I mean, maybe they're fantastic for that up close moving things around, but when I look at it, I think that's a lot of, you probably have to take up a bunch of space to just do a little bit of movement.
Right.
I'm too lazy to even put a mic on a mic stand. I just hand it to the intern and I go, "You're now the human mic stand."
Yeah.
Say the name of the mic into the mic and move it around with your hand. And, if we need to mark where that was, I'll have somebody else take a photo of you real quick.
Perfect. Yeah.
Why did you try one of the robot
No,
things?
I haven't. I saw a picture of one and made me think about it last night. I
think it'd be cool to hear what those different positions on an amp sound like.
Yeah.
There is actually a fantastic video on YouTube where somebody lined up a whole bunch of 57s pointed straight at the amp from the center of the cone out to the right edge of the amp. And then they did a whole bunch at the 45-degree angle from the center of the cone out to the left of the amp. And you can hear every single mic on the exact same guitar part. I thought that was kind of a good way to just kind of quickly, say like, well, what do they all sound like? How different is it?
Right. It's, I don't know. I like that stuff, but at the same time, it takes so much time to set it up or try it.
Yeah. Well, it's one I've messed with many things. I haven't tried everything, but I've certainly tried the experience of like trying as much as we can in a moment.
Right.
And it's like having 100 plugins. It doesn't actually necessarily get better. It's like
different flavors.
I find my brain can try, one of 5 things really quickly and then decide which I want to go with. And that's about it. It's almost like, how many switches are there on a Strat? There's about 5 positions. That's probably the ideal amount, right?
Any more than that, too much.
Yeah. It just becomes too many things to even keep track of.
Right.
What about vocal comping? How many vocals can we comp from? I can handle more than 5, but But 5 good
Yeah.
ones.
I don't know. I kind of, I usually work in full takes, and we land on one that we're like, that was the basis. That one had the most vibe or the best storytelling or whatever. And then we'll comp from that one. I couldn't tell you how many that is going to be.
You're like, that's the good one.
Let's you know what I mean? There's
it.
one, I can't stand like punching syllables and words here and there. I'd rather go listen to a couple of takes and be like, did you get it on that one? All right, we're going to cut that in. And most times you can, but comping. I don't know.
Here's a question for you. So I think about your records as sounding high fidelity, and your studio as being very high fidelity. So let's talk a little bit about wiring in the studio. How important is that? How often do you think about that? Do you think about short cable runs between this and that? Do you think about are there things you want to say about the multi-pair cable we choose to go from the mic panel to patch bay? Are there things about keeping connections clean, all that kind of stuff that you've found to be really important?
Well, that's the kind of, decision making you like to do once and just get it done and not have to think about it again, I suppose. But
you mean once when you
set up the studio
first and you have no money to spend on cables?
Right. Because it's stupid expensive for multi-pair cable. It's a lot of copper and a lot of man hours, or I don't know how they make that stuff, but it's just not cheap. So when I bought this place, it was a studio prior to me buying it. And so some of the wiring was done and it's in there and I can't really change it too easily. So luckily Neil, the guy who had the place before me, he put in, I think he used Canary, multi-pair cable. But most of the time when I go out and buy it now, if I need it for snakes or things to go from the patch bay to outboard gear, that kind of stuff, I just get Mogami. I couldn't tell you what number it is, but
okay.
It's kind of like buying computers. You buy the best you can because you only want to buy it once. You want to get the most mileage out of it you can. So it's certainly a place where you don't want to cut corners if you can afford not to.
Yeah, that's what I feel about getting computers too. It gets me in trouble because like when I look at the newest Mac or whatever, I'm like, well, let me just jack up everything to max.
There's always something better.
What's that video card? Which one do we need? I don't know. Let me just get the best one.
Yeah. Well, I just jumped through that hoop a couple weeks ago and got a Mac Studio, one of the new ones. And that was a long time in the making. Prior to that, I'd been using my cheese grater from 2010, and I'd done tons of upgrades and rebuilt the power supply and, all kinds of stuff to keep it running and alive. And it was just, I was starting to hit the wall when it came to like rendering time on stuff and OS compatibility. I was at the ceiling there. And so it was finally time.
My cheese grater's sitting right behind me in the office.
You're not using it anymore? It's
No. I finally retired it and I moved to a Mac Mini before the Mac Studio came out.
Got it. Well, I'm excited to take my cheese grater home and use it in the shop. I've got a Pro Tools, what is it? Or a Avid M-Box Pro, now defunct Firewire kind of thing that doesn't work with anything except a cheese grater and before. So I'm excited to have a purpose for this computer. It's not just going to go in my computer boneyard up on the shelf. But
I think I'm going to take all my old Macs because I am one of those hoarders who doesn't throw away the old one, mostly because I'm afraid I'm going to lose baby pictures somehow. But like I think I should set them all up in the bedroom and then just fire them up at night, and it'll just be like
your white noise sleep machine
too.
Server room. Something like that. Or you can...
Maybe I can record myself talking in my sleep.
Yeah. What I did with my old Macs, there's like a shelf in my lounge area where I just made a tower. And the bottom is a G5, and I think there's a G3 sitting on top, and then a stack of a couple PowerBooks I've had through the years. And everybody comments on it. They're like, I love your old Macs, man. And keep my old iPods right next to it.
Or come see the computer museum.
Yeah. But
that's awesome.
Yeah. I don't feel so good about throwing them out or taking them to the tech dump for fear of data or pictures or whatever that might be in there.
Yeah, you don't want to be like that guy who threw away his old hard drive before Bitcoin got really high, and then now he had to put out a bounty of like $10 million for somebody to dig through the dump and find his old computer.
Oh, yeah. Don't want to be that guy.
Oh, wait, that's a different podcast. Sorry, Rockstars.
Right.
Every studio needs a good vintage mic for that classic warm sound. Whether you're looking for those airy highs, sweet mid-range, or silky low end, a good vintage mic can put the magic in your mixes. So it's no wonder vintage mics have been loved and praised by thousands of engineers for decades. The JZ Microphone Vintage Series are built by hand in Latvia using only the best electronic components and feature the patented Golden Drop capsule design for great detail and richness of tone that will bring that classic vintage vibe to your studio and be a real workhorse for your sessions. This time, our friends at JZ Microphones have come up with a special offer just for you, Rockstars. Use the coupon ROCKSTAR to get 40% off the Vintage Series mics V67, V47, or V12, the mic you're hearing right now. Plus, they'll throw in a free shock mount worth $120 for a limited time at jzmic.com. Atom Audio introduces the all-new A-Series line of monitors, featuring the XART accelerated ribbon tweeter design, built-in DSP-based room correction, and speaker voicings, allowing you to customize your Atom Audio monitors to fit your control room. The A-Series will rock in any studio. Small studio spaces or immersive multi-speaker configurations are perfect for the A4V or the new A7V, the next generation of the incredibly popular A7X. Mid-sized rooms and narrow spaces will love the low profile of the A44H, expanding on the A7V sound, or the A77H, a true three-way midfield monitor delivering rich, spacious sound. And bigger studios will love the A8H, a three-way speaker and the pinnacle of the A-Series that delivers extremely accurate sound required for critical listening environments. Get the Atom Audio monitors and subwoofers that are right for your studio with an extended 5-year warranty at atomaudio.com. Howdy, Rockstars. We're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Stephen Shirk, joining us from Shirk Studios in Chicago. Are you ready to jam, Stephen?
Ready to jam.
Hey, so I'm trying to remember where the studio is located. I think of it as being a little bit south of the tall buildings.
A little bit west,
in the city?
Actually, like due west. If you go out
due west. Okay.
Yeah, if you go out on Chestnut Street, which is right in front of the studio, and you look to the east, the Hancock building is on Chestnut Street, downtown there, right on the lake. So, just to give you a little lay of the land.
I was up there not too long ago with my daughter to we were doing some looking at colleges and stuff like that. We went to the University of Chicago campus, that's probably like
down
on the other
end.
side.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The south side of downtown.
Okay. All right. Groovy. Well, so let's see here. Let's talk about some of these records that are in your playlist. I'll just start at the top and kind of go down through it, and who knows, maybe we'll repeat ourselves a lot, but Joe George, Golden Afternoon.
All right.
Let me see here. Natalie Bergman, Mercy. Those are two, probably along with others, where I was just like, holy shit, these drums. I think the Joe George might have been programmed.
Yeah, Joe George, that was the drum track. What is it? Sequential circuits, like a drum machine, and he just kind of played it in real time. And we thought we thought about editing that, but we never gridded it. It was just like, play the drum machine like a human. That's great. That's great.
I've heard about hip hop sessions going down like that with some producers just being so
Timbaland.
Timbaland does that. Yeah. Like with the MPC that you can just play the beats right in.
I think he's pretty good at that machine. I'm sure there are a bunch of dudes that can knock that out.
Well, this is actually the first time I heard it came from my buddy Adam Long in St. Louis, and he who did a lot of hip hop sessions there. And he would say, some of the producers would come in and just play it, and it'd be right in the pocket.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's cool to hear that you guys are doing that. I guess with the sequential circuits, those are some little buttons to be playing.
Yeah, and they're old. That was a pandemic purchase where I was like, I need a drum machine because I'm not recording many drums right now. And I got it, and it was broken. I had to fix it, and blah blah blah. I got it working, and I just keep it here next to the console for people to use. And I've actually sampled it where I'll bring the kick and the snare in for support once in a while to fatten something up, or it's got, you can kind of like detune a lot of the drum tones on there, and it's just sounds really cool. It's kind of the poor man's Lindrum.
The sequential circuits, is it the Tom or something like that? Is that what it's called?
It's called the drum track.
Drum track. Okay,
yeah,
great.
I think drum track. Drum tracks plural. No C in the track.
Hey, by the way, let's do an experiment for the Rockstars, because I could just hear you go off mic, and I remembered we're on your RCA44, which is a ribbon mic, Rockstars. It's like the king of ribbon mics, really, to be honest. And it is, and as we know, a ribbon mic is a very distinct figure 8 pattern. So we have an opportunity to hear Stephen. Well, maybe we do. Maybe we don't if you're locked in with your headphones. But go around the mic and talk into different parts so we can hear what kind of rejections we get. And then who knows what, the mix and zoom will do to it. But I'd be curious.
Well, here we are on the front. I'm about 8 inches off, and I'll get real tight. You can hear the proximity effect really take off. Pulling back. Now I'm going to move around 90 degrees to the side. Now I'm in the rejection side of it, and this is the best.
So we're hearing just the bounce, your voice bouncing off the other walls.
Yeah, pretty much. And this is the best part of a ribbon mic, to be honest, like the most useful tool of it.
And it was a very nice tone. It sounded quieter, but it didn't sound like weird comb filtery or anything.
It's that null that it's just so useful when you're in a tracking situation. You got multiple players in a room. You can, you direct that null towards something you don't want to hear, or you want to minimize that bleed. And it is your best friend, like the figure 8 pattern in a live track.
And when you do that, we talk about that occasionally. It seems to come up more on sessions with either horn players or a lot of bluegrass and acoustic things where everybody needs to be in a circle, or like the vocal guitar kind of combo. But if you do that, do you find like you're setting up the mic first to get the right tone out of the instrument, or do you find you're setting up the mic first to reject the other instrument, and then you're listening to the instrument that you want to record?
I guess I'm not sure I'm understanding exactly. So am I choosing the mic based on the tone or on the its ability to reject? Is that?
Yeah, I guess that's the question. Like when you're positioning it, do you say, okay, I've got, banjo player over here and I want to reject that. Mm-hmm. So you start by placing the acoustic, the mandolin mic. I'm just throwing you into the bluegrass.
No, that's fine.
Bluegrass every day, right?
Yeehaw.
But I mean, like, do you set up the figure 8 so that it rejects the banjo first, and then you're like, okay, that seems like that could be the good position, and then you put the mandolin in front of the.
Yeah, I think it's they're humans and they're never going to sit still entirely, so you have to adjust. But I try to go in if it was let's say a bluegrass session, and I was going to set 4 or 5 instrumentalists up in maybe a horseshoe kind of round thing. I would use the null of the figure 8 and direct that to the neighboring musicians, and then put the musician that's in front of it, in the right spot. And I probably have to play with a little bit here and there and turn the mic left and right.
And then a reminder is that because it's figure 8, the back of the microphone is picking up what's across from the mic. So maybe talk into the back of your 44 so we hear how that sounds.
Here's the back of it, which it
sounds just like the front.
Yeah, it's not that different. I mean, there's probably a kind of a,
it is
a measured difference.
I mean, it could have been proximity.
I was kind of talking sideways too, but
this experiment's falling apart.
But you get the idea. I think there's a slight different frequency response on the back, but it's I don't know. I think you could turn the mic both directions and get a cool result.
Yeah,
I did a session once. It's been a while, but this was with the band Bahamas, and had a lead singer.
I've only been to the islands.
All right. Well, you should go check out this Heria session that we did. I forget the name. It might be called Montreal, but the artist is Bahamas, and he had two girls singing backing vocals for him. He played acoustic guitar and sang, and all we used was a 44. He sang into the front, and then they would step up to the back when it was their time to sing, and they would kind of balance themselves. It came out sounded great. There was a guy playing vibraphones across the room. We used a separate mic for that, but my point is that the backside is just as useful as the front. So it's not something you have to get too freaked out about. But
yeah, I did a session at the Bonnaroo studio where we had a 44 in there, and we just set up the two background vocals on either side of the mic singing into it, and it was kind of a cool way to do it.
Yeah. The only downside of the 44, I think, is that it's pretty archaic in terms of noise rejection. It's kind of like the Telecaster of microphones, and that it'll find noise wherever you face it. And so here in Chicago, where we're surrounded by RF and wireless security and Wi-Fi and cell phone towers, all that stuff. So as I turn the microphone 90 degrees, can you hear the hum? I don't know.
Probably
not coming through. But
my mix is way too good.
I'm getting noisy. But there are certain directions that it likes to face.
Yeah.
And I used to think this was a problem with the microphone. And I reached out to Wes Dooley at AA Microphones about it. And he's like, no, man, that's just the nature of the beast. Like, they are noise finders. You got to find the right spot, the right direction to turn them. And I'm sure if you have like a Faraday cage or something like that, maybe it gets rid of that sort of thing. But I don't have.
Have you ever worked with a Faraday cage? And do you want to say what that is?
I have not. But basically, it is a cage usually made with copper mesh, like kind of like screen, like you would have in your windows.
So not chicken wire.
Not. I think you can use chicken wire, but like a proper one. I think like they used to build them. They're very expensive these days, given the price of copper. But basically, you would build it into your wall. So let's say you were sandwiching drywall. I think you would put it between the layers of drywall, and you solder the edges together. And you only can make openings. The bigger the opening, the more leakage there is. And I think the tighter the pattern of the mesh, the higher frequency it can reject.
And so what it does is, in the same way that a mic cable has copper wrapped around the inside of it as a shield to basically catch all the radio signal that's coming in from around it, and then that radio signal travels down the cable and then goes down to ground.
Ties to ground, yeah.
The Faraday cage does this on a big scale for an entire room.
Yeah. Only downside is I think what makes it pretty difficult in this day and age is I don't think your Wi-Fi is going to work very well. And I don't think your cell phones are going to work very well. Now, maybe that'd be a blessing in the studio. People would stop looking at Instagram, but I remember hearing a story. I
think that Buckethead, the guitarist Buckethead in LA, would travel to the studio with a Faraday cage and sit inside it in the control.
I've heard of that.
All the guitar parts.
I didn't know about that with Buckethead specifically, but I've heard of setting
I don't know
up
if he still had
temporary
a bucket on his head, though.
Maybe he's got a mesh line.
Bucket.
He's got a mesh line bucket.
Mesh line bucket, yeah.
But
RF we'll get into.
I think some studios will build booths with like a Faraday cage booth. It's great for guitar, especially high gain guitars and that sort of thing. I don't have that.
Just don't text me during the overdub.
Right. But I'd lean on Isotope RX for that kind of stuff now, rather than building a Faraday cage. And it works great.
It's amazing. I mean, I do nuts. It too. And I find myself because we're, let's be honest. I feel like being plagued with unwanted sounds in the guitar signal is just all the damn time,
Always.
It's like, and when it comes to creative decisions, I just want to turn the knobs until I like the sound coming out of the guitar. And then if I notice, wait, there's also this unwanted thing in the quiet spots. It's like, what are you going to do? I mean, it's more valuable to like go after that cool musical idea and that cool sound and record the damn part and go on to the next song than it is to me to spend waste any time. It's okay to spend some time if you can solve it, but it's easy to get, pulled into a quagmire of what ifs,
Yeah.
and plugging things in and unplugging things and stuff like that. When in the end, if really all you need to do is clean up the fade out on the guitar part,
Right.
because
You don't
otherwise
notice it
noise
half the
comes in.
time.
Isotope does that wonderfully. I'll just go in and take the last chord that sustains out to the fade of the song, just select that whole clip, knock the noise out, crossfade it back in and blend it. And it's like, usually it's like, wow, that totally takes care of it.
Absolutely.
There was what was the, I forgot which one it was. There was one of the tracks in your playlist. Maybe it was Joe George, but there was something that had, that was a really simple, I think it was a vocal and acoustic and a simple kind of like a, looping sound, but it sounded like it came out of a, some kind of drum machine or synth, some kind of like almost like my Optagon upstairs in my studio, where it's like, I bet that thing was noisy as hell. And it made me wonder if like you were able to record it and then just dial out some of the noise with Isotope.
Yeah.
And get it to work. And I did that recently on a session too, where it was like the organ with the drum machine was this great sound, but of course it had that
right 6-cycle hum or something. Yeah, it's that stuff is there, and I think a big part of doing a studio in the city is there's definitely more noise that bleeds into your stuff. And Isotope has been great for that. I'm still using RX9, but it works fantastic. I can't complain.
Yeah,
I don't know which track you were referring to. I can't think of what it is,
right.
but
it's just the idea of like dealing with stuff like that, really.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons I wanted to upgrade my computer, was because my older cheese grater, just the render times for stuff like the Isotope stuff was just, waiting 4 minutes for something. I know that's not that long, but when somebody's the client's sitting there, like, why is this taking so long? Like, oh, because my computer's 10 years old. And
so here's a little tip, Rockstars. When I'm going to explore Isotope, so there's different ways I would use it. On this podcast, for example, I'm using them all as real-time plugins because it's a long podcast and I'm just trying to like dial in settings for noise reduction, declipping, deplosives and everything to where it sounds, it's working for the whole thing and I'm not pre-processing. So that makes it a slower bounce of the whole mix. In the studio, if I've got a track and I'm about to mix and I've got a guitar thing or something that has noise and I'm like, I wonder if I can get rid of all that extra hiss or that buzz or whatever, then, you do things, you can do things like take the denoise and capture a little sample of just the area of your track where there's just noise. So that's a reminder. If you have a noisy thing you're recording, make sure you record a little extra, record a little bit beforehand or after, or have the guitar player, like, just don't play anything for a second. Cause then you can use that as the, what does it call it? But like the target noise, that you can, that the plugin can learn is noise. And then I'll just like take a little, like a short area of the track and do a quick test on it and process the noise out and then press play and just listen back and forth and go, okay, that does sound better, or that's working. For me, that's just the tip to like, you don't always have to process the entire track to test it and see if it works. That's all. That was a long-winded.
No, but that's how you get it done. And that's, your approach is very similar to what I do.
Yeah. Yeah, just do a little sample, work quickly and find out if it works before you even commit to it.
And I think a good way of going about it is, so you take a little sample of the noise and see that RX is doing what you want there. And then really quickly go to your guitar track, for example, the fade out, and listen to the, you can listen to what it's removing only. You know that, I don't know exactly what that button's called, but you just listen to what it's doing, not what what it's going to sound like in the end, but what is it actually taking away, and see how much of that robotic weird stuff, like how much tone is it removing from your guitar, for example, or what do those artifacts sound like, and try to minimize that. And to me, for my uses, that's kind of where I find the sweet spot, like noise reduction versus sonic degradation of the guitar. You push it too far, it sounds
stuff
goofy.
That sounds like guitar in there. You're
sounds
like, oh, wait a minute, I'm removing what I want.
Exactly. And so find that balance using that function, and then I think you're good to go.
Again, to keep reiterating that tips, remove the least amount you can. So for example, if a lot of the track, you don't notice anything about the noises or the buzzes in the guitar because it's masked down underneath rock drums and everything, just process, the beginning or the end where the noise comes out and leave the rest alone, because, it's better to just have that pure tone that's unaffected at all. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't process the entire track if you don't have to, kind of thing.
Right.
Okay, moving forward. Let's talk about Natalie Bergman Mercy. So my notes on that: amazing sounding bass and drums, super tight and focused, great backbeat snare with like a verb guitar thing. What do you remember from that session?
Well,
and what are some of those sounds?
I got to preface this. Like, I had a contributing factor to that record, a small one. I did not cut the rhythm section.
Okay, cool.
We just did the choir vocals and her vocals here on a session. I was just really happy with the way it came out. Like, it was a live situation with, 12 choir singers in the room, and then she was singing in the room as well, and then the choir director played the piano at the same time. And then Natalie took it back to LA and sliced and diced what she needed and put that track together. But I wanted to add that just because I thought it was a great sounding record. I thought she killed it.
Yeah. No, it really sounds really good.
It's a Christian record, a religious record, but it sounds so cool. It sounds nothing like, contemporary Christian rock or whatever. It's a really unique vibe. And she came from a band, or she still is part of it, called Wild Bell. And they were a Chicago band. She's in LA now, and her brother Elliot is part of that band. And he brought the session here. I engineered, and we had a great time. It was the first time I'd worked with her. But we had a huge tornado in the city that night, and we were all in here. It was pouring rain, and none of us knew what was going on. Like, cutting, Christian music in the middle of a crazy storm. We all got out. We had no idea any of it happened. We came outside and everything was calm, except everybody's, trees were blown down.
Hey, man, what's going on? I don't know.
Exactly. That's the beauty of being in the studio.
Exactly.
It's nighttime.
That happens to me all the time. I open the door. I'm like, oh my God, it's just total chaos outside. It's Armageddon.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I'm still just trying to get the bass right.
But yeah, Natalie's session was great. That was super fun to be a part of. I was a small contributor,
but you do. Fun. I mean, you definitely have experience with drums and
absolutely
tight drum sounds and stuff like that. What are some thoughts about that style of, like, if I came in, I was like, dude, let's get drums like that. What would be some first steps for you?
One would be less mics. Let's go with a mono overhead, probably. Probably some tom mics, some dynamics on the toms, a snare mic and a kick mic. Start there. Don't go crazy with room mics and stereo overheads and bright condensers and that's go for fat. Something I'm doing a lot right now for that kind of family of drums is taking the snare mic and multing it. After it hits the preamp in the console, I'll mult it and send it to another preamp. So it's hot line level, and then go into, racked up a pair. Well, they're already racked, but took a pair of Scully 280 amps that are normally in a tape recorder, in a Scully tape deck.
Kind of like my Ampex.
Yeah. And just using them like preamps. These are germanium solid state, there's no tubes, but the way they break up is super cool. And so I'll just pummel the input on there, and I built a pad in so I could kind of dial in the amount of distortion that particular preamp gives back. So I'll mix that in, and I'll mult it to that preamp and mix it back in in parallel, but on a separate track, with the original snare drum. And that's kind of my grit, kind of fat grit, EQ it to taste. And
will you have to gate that as well to control it, or not necessarily?
Not necessarily. I mean, it's not so heavy-handed that it's grabbing everything else. The player has to get drums that sound like what you're talking about. The player really has to know their cymbals, I think. That's
by the way, do you know this the best way to get hi-hat out of the snare drum mic?
Is it an isotope plugin?
No, you go out there and you take the hi-hats off and you just throw them out the front door of the studio.
Yeah, well, that's usually like I don't mic the hi-hats too frequently unless they're doing something detailed and busy like Stuart Copeland-esque, that sort of, police style drumming. Right. But I typically don't mic the hi-hat, especially if you're going for more of a retro drum sound, dry. So that bleed of the hi-hat into the snare mic or into all the other mics is kind of necessary to a degree, but you really have to have that talk with the drummer if they're not doing it already, about balancing the kit. Like there's no bringing stuff way up and way down. Everything's talking to each other and all the mics. It's just how they blend together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You can't play like a rock bar band.
Yeah.
And have it sound like a tight soul drum kit. You have to, that was like the first discovery for me, was just learning like, if I want the drums to sound like that, the drums should actually sound like that in the room.
Yeah.
You got to start by trying to make the kit sound like that instrument. Same thing with guitars, same thing with the singer. It's like, the singer's voice has to come out of their body sounding a certain way.
Right.
And then the mic does its thing.
Yeah, it reminds me of a session I did this past year with Neil Francis, who's kind of like retro soul, not soul, but retro rock jam, kind of a Leon Russell vibe meets Dr. John, kind of piano rock. And he came in for some live sessions for, it was like World Cafe or something like that out of Philadelphia. And so we cut things here, and he would come in ahead of time and we would really dial in the drums to get it to sound like his record, which is, he had Dave Fridman mix the record, and that guy, takes some
that guy.
Yeah, that guy. And he takes some pretty crazy approaches to mixing. And so we were trying to get that sound. And so he would come in ahead of time and we would get the drums dialed in. And part of getting that sound too is like we ended up using the tape machine for these sessions, the MCI, and summing a lot of drums. Like I would usually have 4 or 5 mics on the drum kit. And, but we would also bus all of those mics to one track on the tape machine and completely obliterate it with, crunch. And that was the sound really at the end of the day.
Will your tape machine go down to 7.5 hips?
No, mine's a 1530.
What about the ATR?
The ATR will go to 7.5.
That's have you listened to it at 7.5 yet?
I haven't actually done that. It's set up at 1530
amazing.
Right now.
Like when I had my JH110, which is the MCI 2-track in my place, it had the 7.5 slow mode, and I sent some drums and bass over to it at one point, and I was like, holy shit, it instantly sounds like dub.
Yeah, it takes it, the low end's fat, right? And the high end just gets attenuated in a very pleasing way.
In a very pleasing way.
Well, it's, it's darker.
What are you going to do next, Stephen? Well, I'm going to attenuate the high end on this mix in a very pleasing way.
If you catch me talking like that, you can slap me.
I love it, man. I love it. Attention, all rock stars. iZotope has got you covered. With RX, Ozone, Neoverb, Nectar, and Vocal Synth, you'll have a collection of powerful apps and plugins that will help you get a professional sound in no time. Whether you're looking to clean up your vocal recordings with RX, master your tracks with Ozone, or add depth and ambience to your mixes with Neoverb, iZotope is your magic wand for awesomeness. Plus, with Nectar and Vocal Synth, you can easily add creative effects and unique textures to your vocals and instruments, from subtle mix enhancements to extreme sound design. iZotope takes your music and podcasts to the next level. Go to iZotope.com/rockstars and use the code ROCK10 to get 10% off any plugin purchase. OWC is your one-stop shop for flexible drive storage and connectivity solutions for your studio. The Mini Stack STX for your Mac Mini adds 2 additional drives over a universal SATA HDD SSD bay and an NVMe M.2 PCIe SSD slot, plus 3 additional Thunderbolt USB-C ports. Or the OWC Thunderbay 4 chassis, built like a tank, gives you 4 hot swappable 2.5-inch RAID configurable drive bays, plus an extra Thunderbolt 3 jack for daisy chaining up to 5 devices. Or check out the OWC Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock with 2 RAID configurable drives and 7 ports of connectivity, including a front-side SD card reader, 1 gig Ethernet, 2 USB 3.2 ports, and a dedicated display port, plus an additional backward-compatible Thunderbolt port. Get your studio connected with the Mini Stack STX, Thunderbay 4, and Gemini Thunderbolt 3 dock at macsales.com/rockstars. Use the custom link in our show notes because it's a great way for you to help support this podcast. So thanks, Rockstars. Cool. Let's see here. I put a note on there too to just ask about mastering. I wondered if you had any thoughts about mastering, how important that is, what you like to do for that, for your records, and what you've learned about it.
Well, strangely, like the Joe George record, we finished that one, and I always print a regular mix and a heated mix. And heated meaning it just goes through a limiter where we're not really limiting much, but we're just bringing the level up to, I don't know, -13, -12 LUFS, kind of what you would expect it to be on, like Spotify or streaming services in general. And so I printed these 2 separate mixes, and this was kind of a pandemic record, put together on a budget, and he was really happy with the heated mixes. And so we did go to a friend of his, Rick Fritz, over at Audio Tree, and he mastered it, but I don't think they really did anything. There was one song where they did a little EQ nip out of something that was a little bright, but generally I think they used the heated mixes for the masters. Awesome. And so that was cool. I was happy to have, not have to have it go through another process, and he was as well, because it makes it more cost effective. But I think, mastering is an important thing. With the ATR here now, I've been trying to push my mixes to be closer and closer to what a master would be, so that less work needed to be done after the fact. I've had a few records that got released, using the heated mixes. There are obviously a variety of mastering engineers out there. Anthony, who we've spoken about,
right.
He does great work. He's done some stuff for me before. Very classy mastering. There's other guys that'll push a lot.
Anthony Gravino.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of options, a lot of price points. Guy Justin Perkins up in Milwaukee, that he's done some things recently that I've worked on. And so, I usually recommend a few people to my clients, and say, if that's the road you want to take, here are a few people that I've worked with, and I kind of leave it up to them to reach out based on what their budget and needs are.
It can vary a little bit.
Yeah. And what's discouraging, I think, is when you spend a bunch of money on mastering and it doesn't come back any better. It's just sort of louder,
Right.
And so it's, I don't know. I feel like I'm pleased that I'm getting mixes to the point where they don't always need to be mastered. And that's something I kind of picked up from Anthony as well. He kind of does his own mastering, and by printing, to the tape deck, to the ATR, and then capturing back in on some really nice converters, I feel like I'm getting things to a really good spot.
Nice.
So I don't know. It's nice to be in that position.
Well, it sounds that way listening to your playlist. So
thanks, man.
That's good to hear.
Thank you.
Let me jump to this one. So Quentin Coxum,
Okay.
you and I, if I'm pronouncing the name right, it's some really interesting jazz stuff that you've been doing. And there's particularly a thing going on with the drums too, and just the quality of it all. It's got such a smooth, crisp sound, like on the hi-hat and the cymbals. And I wondered, and my note sort of said it sounds super compressed, but you don't hear compression,
Okay.
And I wondered if, what you remember from that stuff. What are some thoughts about jazz drums or recording horns?
Gotcha. That one we cut right, I think the summer before the pandemic, and then we mixed it during the pandemic, kind of on a shoestring budget, but we got it done. That one was recorded. I think I just bought a new ribbon mic around the time we cut that. It was the Steger RSR402 stereo ribbon mic.
Oh, cool.
And so I was really into using that, and I love that mic. I used it on the overhead for the drums on that one, and probably had 414s on the toms, D12 on the kick, and 57 on the snare, that kind of stuff. In terms of compression, I think I probably didn't track with much compression there. Probably used, during the mixing, I ran the mixes, which I don't always do, but I ran the mixes through a pair of Highland Dynamics BG2s, which I've had for a while. They're compressors, tube compressors that are kind of loosely based on the old EMI RS124. They're kind of a cross between a 124 and a RCA BA6A. So they have kind of a weighty, gushy, nature of compression. And so I think I used those on the 2-bus for that record, which is something I wasn't doing a lot at the time. I do a little more now if the material's right. But it has a nice, like, forgiving grab and hold kind of thing where you slow release. And so maybe that's the compression that you're responding to.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, maybe just the nature of the instruments again, just a lot of cool, like sizzly sounds.
Gotcha.
Awesome.
Gotcha.
But just really has a unique character that is really cool.
Cool. Well, that was a fun record to do. It was cut. I think we did it in two days. I don't know,
if you did a stereo ribbon mic, where might you place that on a drum kit to get a sound?
Well, I try to get it. I try to draw kind of an imaginary line across the top of the snare towards the kick pedal. And so that doesn't like come, if you're looking straight on at a drum kit, that line would come off to your left. Does it make sense?
So not quite. I'm trying to picture it. So you're sitting at the drum stool and you're looking at your drum kit.
Okay. So the other way around. So from a drummer's perspective, we'll do it that way. The snare is right in front of you as the drummer sits, but the kick is going to be a little off to your right. Correct?
Okay.
So a line from the top of the snare straight through across the beater of the kick. That's kind of like what I see as the center. And so I put a stereo mic kind of on that axis. So one side of the stereo is looking down over at the floor tom. The other side is looking at the rack tom. And so the snare and the kick drum stay in the middle. Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah. So the mic is,
because to me
so the mic is like lined up. So if you took a string and held it on the center of the snare and then took it over to and held it on the beater of the kick, that would be the line, and your mic is kind of parallel to that. It's lined up with that.
Yeah.
So the left side of the mic is kind of looking
exactly. Don't think of it like like the way you see drums on stage. You see like the kind of symmetrical looking overheads and that sort of thing. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But like if you're trying to keep a stereo image kind of true with a stereo mic, you kind of want to keep the kick and the snare in the middle, right?
Right.
And so if you didn't line this overhead mic up in the way that I'm talking about, you're going to get a snare on one side. It'd be kind of snare and hi-hat on one side. So by turning the mic the way that I'm talking about, toms are kind of left and right, snare and kicker in the middle. It works out well for me. I think I watched some.
Does the hi-hat end up sort of feeling like it's
so that'll be no, it's because it's a little over on the side. It's subtly on the side, but not like if you were sitting there as a drummer, it wouldn't be hard left.
Yeah.
It's more
I think that's interesting. That's a new one, which is cool to hear. Love hearing some new ideas for how to do this stuff.
I didn't come up with it. That was I think I watched a video with George Massenberg teaching some class, and that was his approach. I was like, that makes total sense to me. So I'm gonna try it. He kind of knows what he's doing, so seems like
so as opposed to thinking of the perspective of a drum kit as being the same as what the drummers, like if you put a stereo mic in front of the drummer's face, that would be like a kind of almost like a 90-degree different way of looking at the kit than what you're describing. So that's cool.
Yeah. So
all right, great.
Lots of ways to do it for sure. I use that same mic as a room mic mostly these days. And I enjoy it for that. It's
and that's a ribbon mic.
That's a ribbon mic. Yeah. It's I usually use the knoll kind of facing the drum kit and the stereo field looking at the walls, if that makes any sense. Like a room mic facing away from the source, that mentality.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. But it's figure 8. So it's probably really a Blumline kind of.
It's exactly a Blumline thing, but there's still a knoll at the top and the bottom.
Oh, I see. Okay. So you point the top towards the drums.
Exactly. So the Blumline is looking at the walls 90 degrees away from the kit.
That's awesome, man. You're doing everything weird. I love it.
I don't know. I try to do it different a lot. Like that's one of my things, is to not do the same drum setup every single time.
Yeah.
And when we're making records, I if the budget allows and the timeline allows, I'd love it when we set up drums uniquely for each song, mic them uniquely for what the song is asking for. Not we're cutting 10 drum songs today, and here's the setup. And nothing wrong with that. I just enjoy the diversity.
So if you did a bunch of songs in a session, are you saying that you don't typically do a 10 song session, or that you would actually change it around from song to song?
I do 10 song sessions, and in that situation, you can't change Mike's situation. You can't change that much. It's just, nobody has the patience for that. And you usually don't have the time for it. But if it's a record I'm producing and we know we're going to be working on over the course of a year or 6 months or something like that, I'd prefer to break it into doing things in a batch of 2 songs here or 1 song at a time, and just living inside of that song. And what does it ask for? Let's mic it this way because we want that long kick tail, and this one needs a fat snare and a really tight kick, or whatever. But just taking that approach.
How often do you find that you might want to use ribbons over a drum kit instead of condensers? Or do you find
comes down to
do them all?
Comes down to the drummer a bit. Like, how do they play the cymbals? What kind of cymbals do they use? Are they bright and wet cymbals? If that's the case, and they hit them hard, then I'll go with a ribbon. If darker cymbals,
the ribbons,
it's just
and
more
why
forgiving.
Would you go with a ribbon?
It's more forgiving, and what harshness may come out of the cymbals because they were hit hard, kind of gets tamed, beautifully tamed by the.
And do you find that all ribbons sound very different from each other, or do you find that generally speaking, a ribbon would have that forgiving quality?
I think they all kind of have the forgiving quality to it. You can tell when it's a ribbon. It sits in that family. I think the differences lie more in the mid-range, like how much do they push the mid-range, or how much weight do they grab in the bottom. Like my Coles, for example, seem to really grab the bottom nicely, or the RCA that I'm talking in now, the 44. It has a way of grabbing the bottom like no other mic. The Stager is it got a little more of a mid-range push as compared to the AEA R84s that are like my oldest ribbon mics. So they all kind of sort of do a different thing.
I remember having a 44 here in my studio, and I sang and played some guitar on it, and I was like, whoa, it had that like low chest, like, for that like kind of crooner thing, where I was like, wow, that's where that comes from.
Yeah. I had a record that I was working on recently with a guy he's like, man, I was reading an article about this RCA mic. It gives you the voice of God. I want to use that. And he kind of had this small pinched kind of vocal tone, and we tried it, and it still sounded small and pinched. It wasn't the perfect solution, but we tried.
Well, it's funny with vocalists, I find that like you really, if you can, just try out a bunch of different mics, because sometimes you just don't know what's gonna sound cool, and they all do different things. It's kind of like plugging different guitars into different amps. Yeah,
and it comes down to the arrangement too. How much space is there for all that? If you want all that big low end, like you can't have a busy arrangement and expect that to cut through. You've got to have openings.
So let's talk a little bit about acoustic and guitars.
Okay.
I wrote down Matt Gold Midnight Choir. I think that had acoustics on it.
Yeah.
There was another one maybe. Oh, right. And then there's Fur Trader. Last year's model is a great acoustic and vocal sound. And I wonder if you want to talk about, again, maybe we covered a little on the last time, but it's always fun to hear more about it. Recording acoustics, large diaphragms versus small diaphragms, and then like thoughts about recording voice and acoustic at the same time.
Gotcha. Well, I think if you're just recording acoustic guitar and you have one mic or you have to choose one mic, a great starting point is a small diaphragm condenser. Lots of detail, sits in the track with ease. You don't have, the boom isn't quite as pronounced as you might get with a large diaphragm condenser.
Yeah.
On the other hand, like you put a 67 in front of an acoustic, that's not a bad sound. So
right.
You just have to be more specific in your placement of the mic so that you're not getting too much of that boom from the sound hole.
Yeah.
But a KM84 is a great, or something similar. I have a pair of Octava 012s that I've used forever. That
those
can
are
get
great mics.
Man, for the money. I bought them for, I think, $99 each from Guitar Center in like 2001.
Yeah.
And you can have, what's that guy's name? Michael Jolly. I don't know if he still does that mod, but it's not expensive, and it takes, a cheap mic up a notch for sure in terms of noise floor, and it's not quite as pinched in the upper mids.
Was that Octava mod?
Yeah, that might be that might be it. But anyhow, that's a workhorse mic if you're on a budget. I know tons of people that still use those. I see them on drum overheads or spot mics for cymbals, or I actually use some on bottom snare sometimes with the pad in for a smoother. Sometimes I'll put a 57 on the bottom of the snare, and sometimes the 012 just for a little. It doesn't get as hashy.
I used to use them on tom mics sometimes.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
I think it sounded great, but what they weren't great at, those particular ones for a tom mic, is they don't do the cymbal that's crashing near the tom.
Off axis stuff is kind of hashy.
Yeah.
But back to acoustics. That's a 67 is probably my go-to here. I know not everybody has one of those, so the KM84, the small diaphragm condenser, is a great option in that world as well. Again, it kind of depends on the arrangement too, how much real estate is available for the acoustic to sit in terms of low end. I know you were asking about vocals and acoustic guitars. I'm assuming you're talking about at the same time, that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah.
The ribbon mic comes, or a figure 8 mic comes in super handy there. On the Joe George record that is in my playlist there, there's quite a few songs on there we cut. I should preface, like, that record was written to be a solo acoustic with some embellishments kind of record, and we built it up quite a bit, but all those songs started off with Joe singing and playing nylon guitar or steel string guitar. There's only, I think, 2 songs on the record where we cut a guitar and then cut a vocal separately. And so that whole like bleed situation between vocals into the guitar mic or guitar into the vocal mic, that was a thing I had to wrestle with a lot. And so figure 8 was my best friend there. And there were times where it was still difficult, but it was, we're happy with the way it came out.
And why don't you describe that one more time for the Rockstars about how you would do the figure 8?
The figure 8. Okay. So the null, so we've got a figure 8 mic on the acoustic guitar, have the null of that acoustic guitar mic facing the singer's mouth, or approximately in that direction. Same approach goes to the vocal mic. The null of that figure 8 vocal mic is facing towards the acoustic guitar, and the pickup pattern is facing towards the singer's mouth. The closer you can get those 2 mics together, the better your phase relationship is going to be.
Meaning don't get the mic close to the instrument.
Yeah.
The voice and the guitar, get the mics close to each other.
Yeah. Like you can use a stereo mic to do like that Stager mic. I've done that before. And then your 2 capsules or 2 ribbon elements are super close together and pretty much in tight phase relationship. And you're going to get the best bass response that way. You're going to get the least amount of comb filtering. But sometimes you need to use a different, sometimes you don't have a stereo mic available.
It depends on how somebody's sitting with the guitar and singing.
Absolutely.
You know? If you're leaned over your guitar and your voice is sort of singing down towards the mic and the guitar is sort of playing up towards the mic, that can work. But if somebody's standing upright, the guitar's too low and the voice is too high.
Yeah. And I find that when somebody's sitting with a guitar in their lap and singing, they're usually not singing straight ahead. They're kind of singing over the neck of the guitar. And so that pickup has to be, or the pickup on the microphone for the guitar has to kind of be in a weird position. It gets a little tricky. And so you got to play with it. And you got to get your singer or your performer to stay in a position, because they'll move and the sound changes for sure. And
and it's funny, all these things that we got to think about. So another thought that comes to mind is the person comes in and says like, oh, let me sing and play. And then maybe we'll, and then you're thinking like, are we going to get it as a performance of vocal and guitar? Or are we going to do that and then they're going to play the guitar and replace the guitar and then sing and replace the voice? And then at that point, the question comes up to mind for me like, okay, well, if we are going to replace the guitar and going to replace the voice, I feel like I would choose a very different kind of miking.
Yeah.
For just a guitar and for just a voice, right?
Where you have a lot more flexibility. But it's tough to beat the singer, whoever it is, playing guitar and singing at the same time. Like there's a connection that happens there. Or playing the piano and singing at the same time. If it's that kind of song, like having them go down at the same time feels the best, period. Like, unless,
well, what about pitch? Just pitch on singing.
I better get it right.
Better get it right. Howdy, rock stars. Do you ever feel like you're spending all this time watching YouTube videos, trying out mixing tricks, and tweaking version after version of your mixes, but it's just like not getting you anywhere? Have you ever wished that you could have more of a simple and straightforward process for creating a pro mix that wouldn't take you years to learn? Look, what if you could have a Grammy-winning mix engineer who understood all of your mixing struggles and could actually coach you through them? If these are any of the questions that you're struggling with, then the Ultimate Mixing Masterclass is just for you. Now you can discover this proven step-by-step mixing system from Grammy-winning mixer Craig Alvin for consistently creating pro-quality mix from your home studio that will sound amazing everywhere. Listen to this quote from one of the students. Absolutely the most informative and helpful block of information and mentoring on the mix process I've ever been a part of. It was like sitting behind a mix engineer for years, watching and picking up tips along the way, condensed into a 6 to 7 hour session. That's from David P. Look, if you already understand the basics of mixing, but you're ready to take your mixes to Grammy-winning quality, then go to ultimatemixingmasterclass.com and check it out. In fact, I'm so confident that you're going to love this, that if you can't get a great sounding mix within 30 days, just send me an email and I'll give you a full refund, no questions asked. So go ahead and take your mixes to the next level like you know you want to at ultimatemixingmasterclass.com. No, I was going to suggest that for a lot of people, it's easier to sing in tune with the guitar because it becomes one instrument, your voice and the guitar all together. Whereas it can be tricky for people to find their pitch center in a pair of headphones. I mean, even for myself, I just sang overdubs on tracks and headphones and, found myself for a lot of it just thinking, fuck it, I'm just going to have to like trust how I feel about this vocal instead of whether I can't even really hear whether my voice is in tune. So who cares? Right. Go for attitude.
Absolutely. The emotion and the attitude carries way more weight. I mean, not to say that you don't want bad pitch, but put all your eggs in the emotion category,
in the performance
in that basket. Yeah. So it's
what are some things that you do to help a singer get a great performance in the studio?
Getting them good headphone mix, and that's something I go back and forth with. I have it's called a Pro Q, or Private Q headphone amp distribution system where it's multi-channel and very flexible. And for those who know how to use that and create a good headphone mix, it's awesome. Most people don't. And you go out and you check the headphone mix, you're like, holy shit, all you're listening to is yourself. No wonder you're not, playing off each other. So you have to guide them. And I've slowly started to get back to delivering a stereo mix to people and maybe giving them one track to bring like their vocal up or down. But even then, like sometimes just doing the headphone mix for the artist is the best thing. At first they'll be like, well, I'd like to have control, but if you can get them emoted, get them feeling the track in the right way, it all comes together. I found that if somebody listens too much of themselves in their headphone blend, their pitch reference gets lost. Like if their vocal is too hot compared to the track, usually they're going to be singing sharp. That's just, I mean, that's a rule of thumb. It's not always right. But if somebody's singing sharp consistently, I'll be like, hey, try turning your vocal down and see how that works for your pitch, and do that sort of thing. And a lot of times it works. It gets them back. They're hearing their reference notes better. And so they're singing more in tune.
Have you ever had this happen where they do a first pass and then they tell you at the end that they're like, oh man, let's work the mix. I can't hear myself at all. And then you're like, yeah, but that first pass was great. Like sometimes the first vocal pass turns out really fantastic, even though the headphone mix, like they couldn't hear themselves.
Right.
All they heard was band. Right.
See,
and it's probably, they probably just naturally trusted their natural body.
Yeah. They're just like, this is what I do.
Decision.
Boom, go.
Yeah.
It's,
I mean, thinking about it, it's like, there's a couple of, because I think about this a lot. There's, we analyze like, where does pitch come from? So you've got what the singer is hearing in their ear that's indicating the pitch is correct or it's not correct. But a big part of it that we don't talk about a ton is just there's muscle memory.
Yep.
For like, this is what my body feels like. And this is the correct muscle tension in my neck and in my diaphragm and everything.
Yeah. It's a challenge.
A funny thing for me is I've learned doing more singing in the studio that basically the fatter I am, the better I sing. So in other words, like I've learned to just completely let it all hang out so that I'm all singing from the diaphragm and like everything above, the chest and up through my neck is just relaxed. But all the singing comes from the diaphragm, and it's a good thing I'm in a vocal booth. That's all I can say about it.
Well, that's an important, like letting the singer be super comfortable and not feel like they're in a fishbowl. That's something I've been working on. It's easy to get to vocals in a session and the lights are up and it's everybody's in the control room watching the singer. Singer gets nervous and you look in and the singer's got their hands in their pockets and they're not moving and they're wondering why it's not working. Like one of my favorite things to do, and this goes for instrumentalists as well, not just singers, but like dancing to the music, if it allows you to, or swaying, or like getting your body involved in the rhythm of the music really helps. And some people feel stupid. They're like, well, I'm not a dancer. I'm like, well, fine. We'll turn the lights off. We'll put a gobo in front of you, whatever it takes. Let's get you feeling the vibe. And once they start moving around and to the music, the playing, if it's guitar or bass, I feel like half the time that helps them lock in more with the singer.
I feel like Gloria Estefan has been trying to tell us that for a long time, man.
But I'm being serious, but I know what you're saying. Totally with you. I think it really works. And people look at me kind of funny when I'm like, dude, dance to the music. I'm like, come on, dude. I'm like, I'm not looking. Don't worry. Like,
no. So many times I look out there and the singer's like hands in their pockets or they're standing perfectly still. And and I realized I was like, well, that's not a performance. A performance has got to have like body movement, and the singer should feel comfortable, but they should still deliver like they're in it to win it. Like the audience is either the audience is right there or maybe their internal emotional audience is right there.
Right.
Because obviously every song's, not every song's the same, fist pumping in the air is not going to work for, a quiet genre of music or something.
Right.
But really going for it. I've also found for me, sometimes it helps to just like, my arms are up in the air. I'm like doing crazy dances in there. And I'm like, and I'll visualize the note with my hands when I'm singing harmonies or even lead stuff. And it made me think that whole like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. I was like, holy shit, that's where that comes from. That's what it's all about. It's like a visualization of like a a hand movement and a symbolism for those notes.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised at all if that is also behind where that comes from.
I think you're right.
That it actually helps pitch, not just helps you learn, the name of a note.
Yeah. I'm with that. I think
all right, then.
Another thing that helps too is when you get an artist, when they get to the point where like, all right, that was a good take, or they feel like they've got it. This could be for a singer, or this could be for the whole band doing live takes or something. Just tell them, all right, we have that one. Now I want you to do one more and take it 10 or 15% further, like animate it even more, go over the top, or what you think is cheesy. Like just take it a little too far and see what you think when you come back and listen, And sometimes, not every time, but sometimes it's just where it needed to be. It's totally awake. And now that they know they've got this comfortable take that's technically good in the bag, let them open up a little more. And you know how I mean? Like we're so...
Yeah, because you don't want to give people the impression that what they just did wasn't good either.
Right,
But you want to see if you can get better. Sometimes I'll just say, hey, let's see if we can beat that one.
Right.
Which I'm sure I got that language from Brad Jones back at Alex the Great, when I started out.
Cool.
So much we just borrow these great ideas and just keep them going.
Absolutely. We're all building upon those who came before us, for sure.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Well, we are. I'm at the risk of taking us way over time here, so
okay.
let me hit you with a couple of quick questions, and
right
then we'll get out if you got a moment still.
Cool, I'm good.
Okay, cool. How about sharing one more recording tip, hack, or secret sauce? Something that the Rockstars could use on their next session. Is there anything that comes to mind right away, or have we covered them all?
I don't know, a tip or hack.
What's something?
I think printing effects, like things that you haven't, it could be in a plugin, could be an outboard piece of gear, but printing them into the session, committing to them so that you can't go back and keep tweaking them. That's something I've found that has been working for me. I mean, you can still go tweak them, you can still go EQ them or whatever, but having them printed as an audio track somehow frees up my brain. And I kind of, once something's printed, I see it as more of it. That's staying. That's
right.
And if I want to change it, I edit it as audio, as opposed to continuing to mess with the parameters in a plugin or in an outboard piece of gear.
Would you print a plugin effect or as well?
I have, absolutely. Like like Echo Boy doing delays and things in there. I print those all the time. Or the what's that Primal Tap, that Lexicon primetime emulation. Like cool. I'll print that one because you can really kind of play that one. You can't play it as well as the hardware, but you can do sample holds and things in there that are a lot longer than what you can do in the hardware.
So it has the freeze button on it?
Yeah. So stuff like that.
Does it sound similar when you turn the speed way down and it goes like...
Yeah, it drops the octave. Yeah, it's great. I still like the analog one better, but that one, there's times where you need to have a longer sample hold, and that one,
makes me feel like I'm back playing Yar's Revenge on the old Atari 2600.
Yeah, I love that plugin or that piece of gear. That's
okay. So
awesome tool.
Share this. How would you, for printing the plugin back, describe the setup and the routing real quick?
So if it's most of the time when I'm doing plugins, like effect plugins, I don't usually put them right on the audio track of let's say it's a guitar, for example. Like I will bus to an aux return and I'll bus to an aux track. Does it make sense? And put the echo on that so I can blend it back in. I don't usually do a delay or a reverb right on top of audio. I like to keep the dry and then mix the effect in parallel. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So doing that, if it wasn't on an aux track and I was just monitoring the effect but wasn't committed, I would just open up an audio track and bus it to that and print. Either hit record in real time or you can do commit. The commit function, Pro Tools, if you're up on Pro Tools 20, I think is when that came in, maybe.
Yep.
Or freeze, I believe. That sort of thing.
But I guess if you're pre-busing it to a track, then now you have that ability to, so Rockstars, you've got vocal track. Right below it, you've got an aux return with the effect on it, like the Echo Boy or something. Yeah. And then right below that, you have an audio track called Echo Boy Print or something like
called
that.
Print, yeah.
And so then that way, as you do each pass, you could be in record on the print track and turn the knobs. And then when you're like, oh my God, that was amazing, you just got it.
Yeah, it's there.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's a fun way to go. And it somehow that helps my workflow. Just having things printed and committed.
I kind of wish Pro Tools already, in the same way that there's an instrument track for MIDI, I kind of wish there was an effects track like that where you didn't have to set up, you didn't have to route an extra thing.
Yeah, that would be cool. Like you could convert an aux track into an audio track without creating a new track.
Yeah, and that the effect was printing onto the track.
Yeah,
that would be cool. Who's listening? Who out there is listening?
You know what they just added that I love is the change the number of lanes in the track. Like if you set up a mono track and like, oh, I wanted that to be stereo. Now you don't have to delete your mono and stuff.
Oh, nice.
You can make a mono track, a stereo track, or vice versa. Or you could probably even go wider with, Atmos stuff, surround.
That's great. Yeah. Very cool tip. I did not know that yet. So that's awesome. This episode is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you're ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I mastered my own record, Skadoosh, the soundtrack to this podcast, in fact, using nothing but plugins in PreSonus Studio One. These techniques would work for you no matter what DAW you're using right now. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads to practice your mixing and even include in your mix portfolio if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started now, or look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Okay, how about another a favorite hardware tool or something physical you like having in a session?
Let's see, hardware tool,
or just something you're excited about.
The tape machines have been my favorite hardware lately, but looking around, I racked up a pair of transformers during the pandemic, some old Western Electric 111Cs, and I've been printing through those wired so that they drop your level down a little bit, but I usually run my 2-mix through that, and 600 ohms on the input and 150 ohms on the output. So your level
is literally just like 2 wires going into a transformer, 2 wires coming out kind of thing.
Pretty much, yeah. It's pretty basic. You just got to find the transformers and figure the wiring out. But I'd help you with that if somebody reached out. They'd add a nice color when you do them this way. When you can load them up and hit them kind of hard, and they give you something back. If it's the same in as the same out, then they're pretty neutral. But that's been something in terms of a hardware piece that I've been enjoying.
So if you were going to try and do a transformer trick like that, you'd want a transformer that was either stepping up or stepping down. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I get confused on what it step up and step out down actually is.
Voltage, I think. Yeah, I don't know.
But it's like the impedance, but
not a 1-to-1.
Yeah, 1-to-1. Some transformers will give you something back, but you really got to peg them to do that. And the better the transformer, like these Western Electric ones, they're a high-end transformer. They're meant to not distort. So you got to just slam them to get something out of them if they're 1-to-1. But if you wire it up with the 600 ohm input to the 150 ohm output, then you're getting a quieter output, so you've got more headroom to slam into it and get a little bit of that grind out of them. So I've been enjoying that. That's been kind of a subtle but fun trick.
So to describe that, that's a great tip. And to describe that, Rockstars, we're talking about taking the audio is electrons in the wire, and then that wire coils around one side of an iron core. Mm-hmm. I'm going back to my electronic days here. Then that iron core generates a flux, an actual magnetic flux inside the iron that goes over to the other side, and then that gets converted back into the coiled wire coming out the output. So you're really converting your audio from electrons into magnetic flux and then back into electrons. And you really, even if a transformer is, quote, not doing a lot, it's really doing a lot. You know what I mean?
Right. It changes it.
You're really processing the audio. That's cool, man. What about a software tool? Anything that's new or fun for you that you're excited about?
I've been enjoying the Overstayer MAS plugin from Softtube.
Ooh,
that's kind of a fun saturator. That there's another one. I think I got it for free, and maybe it's just a freebie. The Arturia Tape Mellowfi. That is kind of like it's kind of the electronics of a Mellotron, but you can put it on anything. Control the tape speed and the wow and the flutter and the saturation or distortion, the EQ of it all, mechanical noise. It's just kind of a
sounds fun.
Add a little dust to something maybe a little too clean or too straight ahead. The wobble is nice on that, like the wow and flutter.
Thinking about your tip for printing stuff, when we think about plugins, we think about so many options, like even a tape thing like that. There's just so many out there now that it seems far more reasonable to try a bunch of stuff and print all those onto as playlists on a track, and then just flip through those playlists after you did 5 or 10 and go like, ooh, I really like this one better than the others, and go with that. Then trying to imagine having like 10 plugins open with, a whole bunch of settings and like then comparing them all. And stuff.
Yeah, it gets overwhelming, I think. And when you print, you can do multiple playlists and then just go through and harvest it for little nuggets. It doesn't need to be on all the time, or, just get the little things that you thought were special, the little performance elements that, the artifacts that you didn't expect. That's the
okay. So here's one that I'm going to share this one. This one's an iOS app that I was at AES and I opened, maybe it was Sound on Sound magazine, and they were like, check out the new Koala sampler for iOS. And I was like, okay, good. Sounds good. I bought it for $5 before I even read the article. And then we were just playing around with it on this session this weekend. And you can just instantly like touch a pad and it's recording a sample on each pad. So it's very quick for like, I suppose maybe there are others that do it that well, but this one just seemed like really easy to grab some quick samples off your iPhone and play stuff back. So we got a bunch of dumb ones here. A little bit of snoring. I don't know if that'll make it through my mix because I'm too good at mixing this podcast and getting rid of everything that we're not supposed to hear.
That's cool.
How about let's go to our last question. Then we're going to take the Wayback Studio machine here, and you get to go back in time and find young Stephen, or maybe you're going back, just a handful of years and whatever, and you give yourself some advice. You say, listen, dude, here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself down the road. What advice would you like to go back and give yourself if you could?
Well, I'll take this back to some advice somebody else gave me that I haven't been very good about following through the years, but we're talking 20 years ago. My boss took me out for lunch with Jay Messina, who is an accomplished engineer and producer. Yes. And, I was kind of
podcast mate of yours.
Yeah. He's, he was kind of giving me the talk, or here's some tips, here's stuff you gotta do or whatever. And what he told me was try to only take on the projects that you're really into and the ones that you think you can grow with. Don't just do jobs or sessions for money if you can avoid it. I mean, you got to pay the bills, obviously, but try to be picky. And I got to say, I haven't done a very good job of doing that, but I always regret it. I mean, we've all been in those sessions where like, why did I take this? This is just a paycheck, but I'm not getting anywhere from this. And that was, I don't know if this is a very good pointer or not, but it's something to keep in mind. And I'm still trying to do it. I've got to pay the bills.
It's a very realistic, bridge that we have to cross a lot. And I think there's different versions of it, right? There's the money session that just pays for the things that you do want. And then you're like trying to keep that in balance. Sometimes there's the sessions that are a style of music that you don't really, it's not your favorite place musically that you want to go, but then sometimes there's craft elements around learning how to make those kinds of sounds and that kind of production that become valuable tools in your toolkit.
Right. Yep.
But in the end, also, like, if you're raising a family and stuff, it's like, well, maybe that's my really highly selective
Yeah.
project,
Right. It's challenging, but it's.
Do you have a way of gauging whether you feel like this is a project that you want to move forward with?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I can tell, like, I've been getting a lot of requests to work on the weekends lately, and that's something I've sort of put off limits for the past couple of years.
Yeah.
Like the pandemic has taught me like the value of family time and how quickly, the kids grow up. And so I kind of put the weekends off limits, and it's slowly been coming back. And it forces me to think about how important is this project? Like,
right.
Are they putting in the same amount of energy I'm going to be putting into it? Because I'm missing my kid's soccer game, which sounds like a small thing, but it's, that's important to me.
It's a big one.
It's
a big one.
And so it's just kind of helped put things in perspective. I don't have a hard line on that sort of stuff. I'd have to feel it out, but it just gives me a chance to stop and think about it and see, okay, what do you want to do here? I'll talk to my wife about it sometimes, and she'll be like, well, if you think it's got legs, maybe you'll do it. It's cool. We'll be okay. You know?
I think that's the language of like of recognizing what you'd be committing to something, and is the artist that you might have a chance to work with, are they really committing that same?
Yeah.
Are they as invested as you feel by putting in the time and effort?
Right.
To do a project.
It's become like restricting my hours has become a good thing. Like I've had some artists be like, well, what, you work 9 to 5? And I'm like, yeah, it's great. And you get them on that track where they're coming back in those hours, 10 o'clock to 5 o'clock or 10 o'clock to 7 or somewhere in there. And they start loving it because it's like, wait, I have a regular night. I can go have dinner. I could go out with my friends or not, but I'm not, it's not 2 a.m. and you're exhausted. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's a really, like, finding that balance has been a good thing for me.
Well, I've really found that my work hours and routines have really evolved over the decades of doing this. What I did in my 20s and early 30s is quite different from what I do now at 55.
Yeah.
Or, even in my 40s. So I think that's natural for us to have variations in how we work and make records over the years.
Right.
Well, cool, dude. Well, thank you so much for hanging with us in Recording Studio Rockstars again. And thanks for going over a little extra and overtime too. Let the Rockstars know, where can they go connect with you if they're ready to make their next hit record, if they want to sound like an amazing band on that Sphere console. What should they do?
They can reach out to me at my website. I'm Stephen Shirk at shirkmusic.com or sshirk at shirkmusic.com. And you could just go to shirkmusic.com. There's a contact page there. That's probably the easiest way.
That's Shirk with an I, Rockstars, SHIRK.
Yeah. Instagram is at Shirk Studios. And so
okay, cool.
Those are the best ways usually. Yeah.
Great, man. Well, dude, great to see you.
Lidge, it's been great to chat. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And Rockstars, thanks for listening. And Stephen, I hope to see you up at your place again sometime soon. And who knows, maybe we'll be having another cool mix clinic there before you know it.
That'd be great. Come say hi, please.
Awesome, dude.
All right. Thanks again.
Talk soon.
Appreciate
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever now, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free course at mixmasterbundle.com. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio. Just look for the link in the show notes below. Thanks so much for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lidge Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music. Hey, Rockstars, I want to give a big thank you to our amazing sponsors who help make this episode possible. OWC, JZ Microphones, Atom Audio, Isotope, Spectra 1964, and Samply. Plus, remember to use these coupon codes for special discounts. At isotope.com/rockstars, use the coupon code ROCK10 for 10% off any plugin purchase. At jzmic.com, use the code ROCKSTAR for 40% off the V47, V67, or V12 microphones. Plus, get a free shock mount worth $120. And at Samply.app, use the coupon code RSR20 for 20% off. And at recordingstudioRockstars.com/academy, use the coupon ROCKSTAR for 10% off. If you enjoy Recording Studio Rockstars, then please check out our sponsors using the link in our show notes because it's a great way to help support this show. These are all things that I use in my own studio, and I highly recommend them for your studio as well. They're going to help you make your best record ever. I want to also thank our fantastic team here at Recording Studio Rockstars, Vlad Weselchenko and Braden Stremming, for additional podcast and video production. Thanks so much for listening, Rockstars, and we'll see you in the next episode. Cheers.